Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going deep, I mean really deep, into a film that I think has to be called a philosophical gut punch.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about Yorgos Lanthimos' 2025 film Bugonia. It's a return to form, in a way.
Yeah.
Back to that unsettling, sterile world of pure psychological terror.
It really is, and I'd say it's more than just a film. It feels like a cinematic event, like Lanthimos is holding a mirror right up to our current moment and just saying, look at how broken all of this is.
Right. And for this deep dive, our entire foundation is this really fascinating source. It's a comprehensive psychoanalytic analysis report.
Yeah, and what's so great about this report is that it treats Bugonia not just as a piece of cinema, it treats it as a potent social symptom.
The symptom of what, exactly?
The symptom of late-stage capitalism, a symptom of the post-truth era we're all swimming in, and, that low-level, constant existential dread of the climate crisis. It's all in there.
Okay, so let's unpack that mission for a second. You have Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons, and they are operating in this incredibly cold, almost surgical landscape.
It's a very deliberate aesthetic choice.
Mm-hmm.
He's moved completely away from the plush Baroque ornamentation we saw in Poor Things.
Totally. This feels much more like a throwback to the clinical modernism of something like The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
And the report argues that the film's real power comes from that, from eroding the boundary between what we see as madness and what might be truth.
And between corporate fascism and just individual terror, it leaves you, the listener, completely stranded. You're forced out of any kind of comfortable moral position.
And that aesthetic choice, that coldness, it's so integral to the horror. It's clinical, sterile even, but the violence feels terrifyingly intimate.
Domestic.
Domestic, exactly. It suggests that the most profound terror isn't something external or spectacular. It's bureaucratic. It's banal.
And speaking of bureaucratic terror, we absolutely have to start there. We have to start with the scene that is the film's central, unavoidable hook.
The basket case scene.
The iconic electroshock torture scene set to Green Day's Basket Case. I mean, from the moment that starts, it's an immediate signal that this film is not playing by any conventional rules.
It is a moment of just profound, jarring cognitive dissonance. You have this cheerful, aggressive, 90s pop-punk anthem blasting. Yeah. An anthem of youthful alienation and anxiety.
A song we all know.
A song we all know. And it's playing while Jesse Plemons' character, Teddy Gatz, is just methodically applying electroshocks to Emma Stone's character, Michelle Fuller, the CEO he's captured.
The report's analysis of that music choice is just... It's so incredibly striking. The lyrics themselves, right? My mind's playing tricks on me. I think I'm paranoid.
It's almost too on the nose. It perfectly reflects Teddy's whole spiraling state. But the real genius, and the report nails this, lies in the context.
Right.
Lanthimos takes this artifact of cultural nostalgia, this kind of cheerful memory for a whole generation, and he transforms it into the soundtrack for torture.
It's weaponized nostalgia.
It absolutely is. It highlights the toxic potential of our own cultural residue, showing how even our fondest memories can become these tools of violence and manipulation.
But what's really fascinating here is the manner of the execution. The report dedicates a lot of time to this, asking the core question that really defines this scene.
Which is?
Is this scene horrifying because it is so violently executed? Or is it horrifying because Teddy executes it with such banal, bureaucratic routine, almost as if he's just clocking in for a job?
And the answer is so clearly the latter.
It has to be. He's not maniacal in that moment. He's not driven by some raw emotional hatred. He's ticking boxes on a paranoid flowchart.
Precisely. It's the chilling lack of passion that gets you. The report explicitly draws a parallel here to Hannah Arendt's famous Banality of Evil thesis.
Right, the idea that unspeakable acts are carried out not by these sociopathic monsters, but by, colorless bureaucrats just following orders.
Exactly. But Lanthimos filters this through a modern, almost a video clip aesthetic. Teddy's doing this evil thing, but it's stripped of all ideology, all personal malice. It's just a necessary administrative step in his paranoid, delusional system.
He has convinced himself this is the job. The job is saving the world, and every single shock is just another data point he needs to collect.
And the routine, the checklist he has, the carefully maintained aluminum foil on all the windows, the Green Day song just playing on a loop, All of this sanitizes the horror for him. It turns it into a procedure.
It transforms torture into a form of administration.
Yes. And for you, for the audience, watching that casual clinical cruelty, you see him pause to adjust a wire or he hums slightly along to the chorus. That is arguably far more disturbing than any overtly dramatic, cinematic torture scene we've seen in years.
Because it mirrors the very thing he claims to be fighting. That cold, detached cruelty of corporate systems.
That's the terrifying symmetry of it.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. We've established the horror, but now, how did we get here? Let's trace the film's source material and see what Lanthimos actually changed. Let's move into the structural and thematic shifts that really define this adaptation.
Right, because Bugonia is a remake. It's a radical transformation of the 2003 South Korean cult classic Save the Green Planet.
A very different film in many ways.
Oh, totally. And crucially, the transformation that Lanthimos engineers, it reflects this massive cultural jump. We are moving from the specific anxieties of the post-9/11 world in 2003.
Where the threat felt external, visible.
Exactly, or rooted in a recognizable class struggle. We jump from that to the world of 2025, which is just defined by post-truth politics, by climate paralysis, by this overwhelming sense of institutional collapse. The crisis itself has fundamentally changed.
And so Lanthimos meticulously adapts the narrative to reflect that profound kind of existential despair.
He has to.
The report details several key structural differences that completely alter the film's thematic focus. So let's start with the big one, the one everyone's talking about, the antagonist shift.
It is absolutely crucial. So in the original, the protagonist's target was a man, Kang Man-sik, a powerful male CEO. The conflict was primarily one of class.
Disenfranchised worker versus the wealthy boss. It's a classic setup.
A classic setup. But in Bugonia, Lanthimos flips this entirely. The target is Michelle Fuller, played by Emma Stone, a female CEO.
And this gender flip, which the report meticulously highlights, it doesn't just change the character. It layers that foundational class conflict with this intense gender conflict and a really sharp critique of contemporary girl-boss feminism.
The kind that has completely dominated the corporate sphere for the last decade. Michelle embodies this new, allegedly progressive executive class, but one that is absolutely no less ruthless than her male predecessors.
So from a psychoanalytic standpoint, what does that shift do to the story?
Well, it makes it profoundly more complex. If the original CEO was a symbolic reflection of the Freudian primal father, the male authority figure who has to be overcome, Michelle complicates that dynamic entirely. She represents a castration threat that is far more challenging for a character like Teddy, especially given his profound psychological fragility, which I know we'll get into. The threat isn't just power anymore. The threat is the unplaceable power of a woman in authority, which fundamentally disorients his already fractured sense of masculine order.
I wonder, though, some critics have argued that if the original film was so clearly rooted in class, doesn't shifting the focus to gender just sort of avoid the class critique? How does the report reconcile those two ideas?
That's a really powerful challenge, and it's a fair one, but the report argues that Lanthimos isn't replacing the class critique at all. He's layering it. He's updating it.
So it's not one or the other.
No. Michelle is the kind of CEO who uses progressive language diversity, conscience, wellness to achieve maximum capitalist cruelty. Her authority is masked in a way the old-school male CEOs just wasn't.
Right, he was just the boss.
He was just the boss. She is something else. For Teddy, she represents the insidious, invisible manipulation of modern corporate power that you can't easily define with old-class binaries. She is the perfect target for his incel paranoia because she's unattainable, she's powerful, and she represents the symbolic order he hates, all wrapped up in a package he just cannot understand.
That makes her a much more potent, much more modern enemy.
Huh?
Okay, let's move on to the co-conspirator shift.
Another huge change.
In the original, the protagonist's ally was his girlfriend, a circus performer named Suni, a romantic partner. Lanthimos completely replaces this romantic bond with blood relation and this really pathological dependency. He introduces Don, Teddy's autistic or neurodiverse male cousin.
And this change just elevates the emotional tragedy of the whole thing. The dynamic shifts from a shared mission between lovers to a profound folie à deux shared psychosis that's rooted in blood and dependency.
Don is so vulnerable.
He is inherently vulnerable, and his relative innocence is just brutally weaponized by Teddy. It makes you realize that the true villain, ethically speaking, becomes Teddy himself. His manipulation of Don is perhaps the cruelest act in the entire film.
Yeah. The report also really zeroes in on this shift in motivation. The original film blended personal revenge with this grand mission of saving the world. Bugonia replaces that with a very potent, very modern cocktail.
It's conspiracy theory mixed with a specific critique of the big pharma complex.
The trauma that fuels Teddy is hyper-specific to our time. His mother was a victim of a botched oxalate drug experiment.
Right, and that single event makes his loss of faith in the symbolic order. The whole system of medicine, government, law feels so immediate and personal. It resonates perfectly with our contemporary anxieties, right? The opioid crisis, the breakdown of trust in scientific institutions, the feeling that corporate interests always supersede human safety.
And the tone of the violence reflects this change, too. The original Korean film had these moments of almost slapstick, very wild physical violence.
It did. But in Bugonia, the violence is cold. It's banal and bureaucratic, aligning perfectly with Lanthimos' deadpan aesthetic. It's clinical violence. Teddy's torture is not some chaotic explosion of rage.
No, it's a meticulous procedure.
Exactly. Just like the pharmaceutical trial that destroyed his mother, he's replicating the institutional cruelty that he suffered.
Which brings us to the final big change.
Yeah.
The climax. The 2003 version ended with this spectacular, almost Star Wars-esque laser destruction, kind of big sci-fi catharsis.
And Bugonia replaces all of that with a silent, bloodless, biological implosion, which is tied directly to the ancient Bugonia myth from the title.
The bombast is exchanged for chilling nihilism.
That's it. The original offered spectacle, Lanthimos offers silence and absolute erasure, and that signals a much more radical and ecological conclusion, one where humanity's fate is sealed not with a bang, but with the quiet pop of a transparent bubble.
This leads us naturally to what the report calls the most radical structural choice Lanthimos makes, silencing the outside world. The extensive detective and police investigation plotline that was so central to the original is almost entirely deleted.
And this is just a masterstroke in psychological isolation. By removing that outside authority, the police, the media, the standard narrative checkpoints Lanthimos isolates you, the audience, completely inside Teddy's psychotic universe, inside his umwelt.
I always think of umwelt as the private sensory world of an organism. And in Teddy's case, his reality is just entirely self-contained. It's sealed off.
Exactly. The lack of an external, objective reference point, there's no one to confirm or deny his claims, no impartial arbiter of facts. It means the audience, just like Teddy, is prevented from conducting a reality test.
You can't check his work.
You can't. You are forced to navigate the entire narrative solely through the lens of his delusion. It makes the film a truly claustrophobic experience. It's very reminiscent of the closed family structure in Dogtooth.
We're trapped.
We are trapped inside the logic of the delusion for 2 straight hours.
So if we're trapped inside the delusion, let's push further. Let's get into part 2 of the analysis, which the report calls the collapse of the symbolic order and the psychosis of Teddy Gatz. Jesse Plemons' performance makes Teddy the epistemological center, right? He's the self-appointed knowing subject who holds the ultimate secret truth.
He believes he is the only one who sees the pattern. He's the only one who's awake. And his journey begins with that foundational trauma. His mother's death because of the pharmaceutical trial. That single event just obliterated his faith in the symbolic order.
Okay, so this is a huge concept, the symbolic order. For anyone listening, how do we translate that Lacanian idea into something a bit more tangible?
Right. So the easiest way to think about it is it's the invisible framework, the rule book of language, law, and shared reality that allows civilization to function.
The agreed-upon dictionary of meaning.
That's a great way to put it. It's the trust that when you sign a contract, it means something. It's the certainty that medicine is designed to heal you, not to hurt you.
And when Teddy's mother is betrayed by that medical system.
That system, that fundamental dictionary of meaning, fails him completely. His entire framework for reality just collapses.
So he loses the shared language, the collective reality. And instead of that leading to pure nothingness, the analysis suggests this trauma creates an excess of meaning, the surplus.
His universe is suddenly overflowing with signs and connections that aren't there.
This is the classic mechanism of psychosis, according to Lacan. When the symbolic order is rejected, the name of the father, which is the ultimate symbolic law, the nom du père, it's structurally missing. It's foreclosed.
The father figure, in this case the benevolent state or medicine, it failed him. And Teddy cannot live in meaninglessness, so he has to invent his own rigid delusional law to structure the universe and make sense of the trauma.
And his evidence for this new law is what? Seeing Andromeda codes in Michelle Fuller's completely arbitrary Instagram posts.
Exactly that. The most trivial, arbitrary signifiers, a particular photo filter, the way a coffee cup is positioned on a desk, they become absolute ironclad links in his cosmic conspiracy.
Coincidence is eliminated from his universe.
Completely. Everything is interconnected, fitting into his terrifyingly dense and absolute system.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial element that I think needs careful nuance. The report frames Teddy's psychology as an incel archetype, but as a product of ideological overload.
Right. And this is where Lanthimos makes Teddy such a symptom of our modern, fragmented political landscape. Teddy isn't a simple political radical. He isn't just one thing.
No, he explicitly says he's tried and dismissed all the available ideologies. Alt-right, alt-light, Marxist, leftist.
He finds no coherent, satisfying narrative in any existing political framework. This isn't an end-of-ideology situation. It's a terrifying overload where the subject is just lost in the noise.
He's ideologically promiscuous. He's just searching for a framework that will validate his existential pain, but every single one fails him.
And this whole search, it just masks his true personal motivation. The report is very clear on this. Teddy's driving force is not political. It's deeply psychological.
So what is it?
He is driven by a desperate need for a cosmic enemy, the aliens, to compensate for his profound sense of personal inadequacy and, in psychoanalytic terms, his sense of castration, of lack.
So the aliens become the perfect excuse for his failure. If he failed personally, if his mother suffered meaninglessly just due to human error and corporate greed, that's unbearable for him.
It creates an intolerable narcissistic wound. But if his personal failure, his inability to function in the world, his mother's suffering, if all of that is actually part of a universal war against these cosmic, manipulative, ancient aliens,
then it instantly validates his personal suffering. He isn't a failure anymore. He's an unheralded soldier in a secret war.
It completely reframes his status. He transforms himself from a victim of a pharmaceutical disaster into the sole keeper of the truth.
It closes the loop. The alien conspiracy is the most effective psychological tool for making his private tragedy seem monumental. It turns a sad personal history into a geopolitical and cosmic calling.
And that is the tragic heroism of the post-truth subject. Believing the truth is more important than actual reality, and being willing to destroy the entire world to confirm that belief.
This grand delusional framework is why he needs his cousin Dawn, who functions as his co-conspirator in this shared psychosis, this folie à deux.
Right. Dawn is described as autistic or neurodiverse, and their relationship is just a horrific exploration of pathological dependency. The report frames it using the Lacanian concept of the mirror stage, but in this warped adult context.
What do you mean by that?
Don, who lacks a fully cohesive sense of self, essentially builds his identity by relying on Teddy's fractured image of wholeness. Teddy provides the structure and the meaning that Don can't generate on his own.
So Don's loyalty is real? It's rooted in affection and trust?
It is, but Teddy weaponizes it mercilessly.
And that weaponization culminates in the darkest ethical breaking point of the entire film. Teddy convincing Dawn to undergo chemical castration.
Just to remain pure and focused on the cause.
That scene it's handled with Lanthimos' signature deadpan formality, but it's a radical biological literalization of Teddy's control. It's the ultimate act of stripping another person of their individual desire, of transforming them into a pure instrument for the delusion.
And the report highlights that this action, despite the supposed purity of their mission to save the world, reveals this chilling fascist drive in Teddy.
A fascist drive that demands absolute disposal rights over the body of the other.
Exactly. Teddy is fighting the manipulative institutional evil of Big Pharma, but his method is to impose absolute tyranny over the closest person to him, compelling this extreme biological sacrifice.
The irony is crushing. He's railing against the system's cruelty by enacting his own highly personalized and even more intimate cruelty.
He demands that Don's body be disciplined and sterilized just to serve his idea of truth.
Okay, let's move on to the object of Teddy's fixation, Michelle Fuller, in Part 3, which focuses on her role as the mask of the big other. And here we return to the gender flip and corporate power.
Michelle Fuller, the female CEO, is the perfect symptomatic target for Teddy's specific brand of paranoid rage. She represents the new executive class, and she fits perfectly into the Ezekian description of the liberal communist.
We need to spend some time defining this archetype because it's so central to the film's critique of modern corporate culture. What does the liberal communist signify in this context?
So the term describes the contemporary elite who simultaneously engage in relentless capital accumulation while promoting socially conscious themes. They embrace concepts like transparency, diversity, sustainability, conscience.
All buzzwords.
All the buzzwords. They use them as part of their brand identity, and they often use these very virtues to mask structural exploitation and capitalist cruelty. They effectively internalize the critique and make it part of the product. They frame exploitation not as a necessary evil, but as empowerment or social responsibility.
So the cruelty is wrapped in wellness. Michelle is the boss who sends out an email about employee mental health while simultaneously overseeing the disastrous pharmaceutical trial that killed Teddy's mother.
Precisely. And her most striking line in the film illustrates this internalization of authority. It's her command to her employees. You can leave at 5:30 if your work is done and your conscience is clear.
That line is just brilliant because it removes the pressure from the boss and it places it entirely on the employee. She's not forcing them to stay late.
No.
She's just asking if they're good enough to leave.
She externalizes the boss's demand and turns it into an internal guilt mechanism. She's not just a boss anymore. She becomes a severe, internalized superego figure. The authority isn't in the clock or the contract. It's located in the employee's self-assessment of their own moral and professional worth.
And Teddy sees her as the source of this insidious internalized control. For him, her identity as an alien completely overlaps with her identity as a woman.
And this is where we bring in the Lacanian concept of the thing or dusting.
Why is she the thing for Teddy?
Because for Teddy, Michelle represents this intolerable void in his meaning-making world. She manifests Lacan's difficult maxim that the woman does not exist. La femme n'existe pas, which means that woman, as a singular, knowable category defined entirely by the symbolic order, is missing. She is the unattainable, powerful object, the thing that resists his attempts to symbolize her, to categorize her, to control her. She is wealth, power, and unknowable femininity all wrapped into one, and because she defies his symbolic order, she must be destroyed.
That explains the nature of the violence, then. When he captures her, the physical torture and the shaving of her head, it's not just about extracting information.
No, not at all. They are desperate attempts to strip her of her symbolic authority, her CEO status, her polished beauty, her professional power. He wants to reduce her to bare life.
So Homo says her.
Right. The term Agamben uses for a life that can be killed but not sacrificed, a life stripped of all political and symbolic standing. Teddy wants to strip her down until she is merely a controllable, finite, biological entity.
Yet the irony is that her composure under torture only confirms his delusion. He expects a human reaction.
He expects crying, begging, a moral breakdown, some sign that she is part of his reality. But Michelle, whether she's an alien or just an extremely disciplined executive, maintains this analytical, detached stoicism.
Her inhuman composure.
Her ability to remain inhumanly composed doesn't break her. It confirms Teddy's core delusion that she is fundamentally other, that she is truly an alien who doesn't feel human pain or fear. Her cool professionalism becomes definitive proof of her non-human status.
It's a vicious, self-reinforcing loop. Let's connect these back now to the chemical castration he and Dawn impose on themselves. This is the violence directed inward, and it forms as a radical metaphor of the film's drive economy.
Right, this internal violence is really the philosophical core of the film. Freudian civilization, right? It's built on the sublimation of sexual drives on Eros, the life drive. We repress our raw desires, and we redirect that energy into socially acceptable pursuits like art or science or work.
But Teddy and Dawn don't sublimate.
No, they literally dismantle Eros through biological means.
They eliminate their life drive entirely.
And this leaves only the death drive, Thanatos, to operate completely unchecked. The purpose of this biological sacrifice is, terrifyingly, efficiency. It's a mirror of the very corporate efficiency they claim to despise.
They transform themselves into sexless worker bees.
Sacrificing all individual desire to fully embrace the death drive, focus solely on the cause.
And this connects directly back to the film's title, Bugonia, and the myth of the hive.
It does. They're sacrificing their individual humanity and desire to serve the queen, or in this case, to destroy the queen, Michelle. This total commitment mirrors the high-demand, totalizing commitment required by modern ideological systems pushed to a horrifying, literal extreme. They become the perfect sexless engine of destruction.
Before we hit the climax, I think we have to touch on the visual language, because the cinematography itself is a psychoanalytic tool. We mentioned the coldness, but the report stresses Lanthimos' use of the VistaVision format.
Yes, so VistaVision provides this extremely high resolution and a significantly wider field of view. But Lanthimos and his cinematographer, Robbie Ryan, they use those signature wide-angle lenses not to open up the world.
No, they use them to shrink the characters within the frame.
It creates this sense of profound insignificance, even claustrophobia, despite the wide expanse.
They look like specimens.
Exactly. They are small, insignificant figures pushed to the corners of a vast, empty frame displayed like specimens in a bug collector's box. The report argues this perfectly reflects the film's title and central theme, and the suburban home, which should be this site of comfort and familiarity, it's transformed into an uneasy, timeless cave by the aluminum foil covering all the windows.
The external light of objective reality is blocked out.
It is. Only the artificial glow of Teddy's paranoia is allowed in.
The visual language is preparing us for the final, irreversible act. So let's move now into part 4. The ontological climax and eco-pessimism. This is where the core truth of the conspiracy finally bursts through, and yet it utterly fails to save anyone.
This is the film's tragic, essential focus. The irony of being right. The massive twist is that Teddy was, in fact, absolutely correct.
She is an alien.
Michelle Fuller is not just a ruthless CEO. She is an alien. The Andromeda Queen.
But the truly devastating Ezekian twist here is that his correctness is precisely what dooms the world.
Yes, he spends the entire film striving to prove his truth, to force the symbolic order to recognize his reality. And when he finally achieves that recognition, he uses his knowledge and his bomb vest to detonate himself as he forces Michelle toward what he believes is her teleportation cabinet.
And this act doesn't save humanity.
It does the opposite. It severs his own head and severely injures Michelle, which is what enables her to execute the very destruction he was trying to prevent.
It's the ultimate self-fulfilling prophecy. He needed the world to be ending to validate his suffering, and his actions ensure that the world does, in fact, end.
He liberates his own executioner in the process of confirming his ideology.
So what happens then?
Michelle, having survived the blast, contacts the mothership Andromeda. She holds a council with her advisors, and her ultimate decision, given Teddy's actions and the totality of human cruelty she's observed, is that humanity is a failed experiment.
And that consultation seals our fate.
It does.
And the apocalypse itself is the ultimate anticlimax. The report calls it the quiet apocalypse.
It's silent, bloodless, and biological. Instead of a spectacular Independence Day-style laser attack, Michelle simply uses her finger to pop a transparent membrane or a bubble around this small, ornate Earth model she keeps in her office.
And that action causes mass, instantaneous, non-bloody death across the entire globe.
The montage of mass death that follows is absolutely chilling because Lanthimos juxtaposes it with the melancholic sound of Marlene Dietrich's 1960s anti-war anthem, "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?"
That combination is what creates the sense of chilling serenity that the report talks about. Violence is quiet, it's detached, it's non-spectacular, but the emotional impact is just profoundly unsettling. And it's all underlined by that nostalgic, melancholic song about loss.
It completely rejects catharsis. It suggests that our disappearance is simply the inevitable, quiet conclusion to a long, unnecessary conflict.
Which brings us to the philosophical anchor of the entire film, the core myth of Bugonia. This title choice is absolutely essential to understanding that ending.
Bugonia, or Bugonia, is an ancient myth, cited notably by Virgil in the Georgics. It's the belief that bees will spontaneously generate from the putrefying, decaying carcass of a dead ox.
Death spawns life.
It's an archaic, pre-scientific belief in regeneration from putrefaction. Lanthimos employs this myth to deliver a radical form of eco-pessimism, which paradoxically contains this kernel of cosmic optimism.
So in this metaphor, humanity is the decaying, toxic ox.
Precisely. We are the sick, harmful entity to the planet. Our mass death is not presented as a universal tragedy.
No, it's a necessary surgical intervention for the planet's healing.
Our extinction is simply the prerequisite for renewed life.
And the final scene, then, is the ultimate visual proof of this anti-humanist view.
We see bees returning to their hive, busily working among the human corpses. Life, the bees, nature emerges immediately and efficiently from the death of humanity. The ending, according to the analysis, is optimistic only for the role itself. It completely rejects the anthropocentric viewpoint that human life is inherently valuable or must be saved.
Lanthimos forces the audience to confront the profoundly unsettling idea that our extinction might actually be a net benefit to the ecosystem, not a tragedy.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this massive deep dive. We've integrated Lacan's symbolic failures, Zizek's political critiques, Freud's drive economy, ancient Greek mythology, all into a 2-hour film that demands multiple viewings.
I think Bugonia is Lanthimos' direct response to the contemporary crisis. It shows us how deeply irrational beliefs like Teddy's paranoia flourish in the ideological void created by the collapse of faith in our established authorities and the rise of the neoliberal corporate structure.
And it seems like the film's ultimate goal is to yank the audience out of that comfortable symbolic order, that world of predictable laws and meaningful language, and push us into something else entirely.
It takes us into the uncanny domain of the real. And the real, in this context, is the realm that is incomprehensible, it's unnegotiable, and it's absolutely destructive. It's what resists all our attempts at symbolization.
And Michelle's true nature, the Andromeda Queen.
She is the pure personification of the real. You can't talk your way out of it, you can't reason with it, and it ultimately obliterates the system that tried and failed to contain it.
What stands out to me most is the way Lanthimos anchors all this dread in the performances. Jesse Plemons and Emma Stone deliver what the report calls career-defining work, selling the absurdity and the underlying dread of this truly dark vision.
Their quiet intensity is what prevents the film from spinning out into just mere farce. They embody the conflicting psychological forces that are tearing the modern world apart.
So what does this all mean for us, for the audience? We've traced the entire arc of Teddy's destructive righteousness, the irony of his success, and the resulting silent apocalypse. If, as this source suggests, humanity basically prepared its own destruction by acting as a virus toxic to the planet and to itself, what is the treatment that Lanthimos leaves us with?
The treatment, in the film's chilling alien logic, is the surgical removal of the virus. That's the Bugonia Myth made literal.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on after this deep dive. The film forces us to consider the existential meaning of the myth, the trauma, and the silent apocalypse. It strips away all of our anthropocentric comforts. If we are forced to accept the terms of the ending, that this was somehow necessary.
Is the virus the aliens, or is the virus us?